Farm work is hard. It's physical, it's technical, it's dirty. The work often is not compensated, commensurate to how hard it is. But it's also deeply satisfying work, a vocation for the people who dedicate themselves to it. A new art exhibit at the Wild Center in Tupper Lake tries to capture the ideas behind farming through something simple. Farm workers' actual used clothes hanging on a clothesline. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Pearsall Wealth Management at UBS Wealth Management USA, subsidiary UBS AG, member FINRA SIPC, 1 Broad Street, Glens Falls.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Monday, July 1st. First up, an herbicide was used over the weekend in Lake George after a years-long legal battle. The herbicide known as Procellacor targets the invasive species Eurasian water milfoil. The Adirondack Park Agency approved the use of the herbicide, though the Lake George Association has been fighting that decision in court since 2022. Last Friday, a Warren County judge denied the LGA's final appeal, ultimately allowing Procellacor to be used in Lake George. According to the Glens Falls Post-Star, the herbicide was applied over the weekend on 2 bays in the lake. It was also used on Chateauguay Lake in Lion Mountain last Friday. The APA has previously approved the use of the herbicide on Minerva Lake, Brant Lake, and Lake Luzerne. So far, the chemical herbicide has successfully eradicated milfoil without apparent side effects to wildlife, habitats, or humans. The Adirondack Land Trust got a big financial boost last week. The group was awarded a $3 million grant to build about 3 miles of accessible trails in the Tri-Lakes. Those trails will be built so that people in wheelchairs or with strollers or other accessibility issues can enjoy some of the most iconic Adirondack views. Emily Russell has the details.
The news of the $3 million grant came last Thursday. That's when I interviewed Mike Carr at his office in Keene. Carr is the executive director of the Adirondack Land Trust.
So it was an exciting day. We learned today that we have been awarded a grant through the Northern Border Regional Commission of $3 million to invest in 2 of our properties that we'd like to build accessible trails on.
Those 2 properties are the Glenview Preserve just north of Saranac Lake and 187 acres along the Lodge Road in Lake Placid. By developing a network of accessible trails at both properties, Carr says the Land Trust is aiming to fill a void in the park.
We've discovered that there's really very little truly accessible trail network in the park. Hundreds of miles of other trails, but very few opportunities for people that have challenges with mobility, and really feel that this is one way of connecting communities to a special place.
The plan, says Carr, is to split the $3 million grant up. $2 million would go towards building about 2.25 miles of accessible trails at Glenview, and then $1 million would go towards building about 1.25 mile of accessible trails along the Lodge Road.
This will allow people with strollers or wheeled walkers or wheelchairs to safely be outside and really enjoy 2 special places. Both of them have big views. Glenview, the backside of Whiteface, and the Lodge Road is really the high peaks and Indian Pass, and they're both kind of dramatic.
Although building a total of 3 miles of trails may not sound like a lot, Carr says making sure those trails are accessible to everybody is complicated and expensive.
So the site is critical, right? It has to be really level. The grades are prescribed at 2%, and most of the Adirondacks is a lot steeper than 2%. So specific grades and drainage is quite important so that they're dry and not soft.
The Adirondack Land Trust still needs to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars to match part of the grant from the Northern Border Regional Commission. The commission is also providing grants to 26 other agencies from northern New York up to Maine. The $3 million that the Adirondack Land Trust is receiving was the largest grant given by the commission. Emily Russell, North Country Public Radio, Keene.
A fire Saturday night destroyed the popular amphitheater bandstand in Lake George, just hours before its first concert of the summer. Village Mayor Ray Perry told the Glens Falls Post-Star the bandstand in Shepherd Park is a total loss and had to be razed to the ground. He called it the center of our village. He said the village would try to salvage the season by perhaps renting a mobile stage as a replacement. Perry said an investigation into the cause of the fire is ongoing, adding he hoped it was not arson. Through the big back windows of the Wild Center in Tupper Lake, you'll see a 500-foot clothesline with about 150 pieces of clothing on it, flapping in the breeze. That's the center's newest summer art installation, finished just last Tuesday. The piece by Brenda Baker is called The Clothesline: Food, Fiber, Air, and Soil. It's about farming in the North Country and all the unseen labor that goes into producing food. Amy Feireisel stopped by the Wild Center and spoke with Baker just after she finished the installation.
So we've just come out of the Wild Center and we're walking in a gravel path towards the sort of path that wraps around this pond behind the center. Can you tell me really quickly what we're looking at?
Well, we're looking at a new installation called The Clothesline: Food, Fiber, Air, and Soil. And this is a large-scale sort of site-specific installation, and it's made up of clothing donated from about 150 farmers from the Adirondack region. And the piece itself is really about telling the story, sort of the cultural geography of the food and farming movement here in the Adirondacks. So each of the pieces of clothing have a tag. Each of the farmers have written a tag that tells a little bit about their farming story or how they have used this piece of clothing. So the clothing is sort of a stand-in for the unseen labor in the farm industry.
And really quick, let's go backwards for a second. Can you introduce yourself?
Okay. So my name is Brenda Baker. I'm a visual artist from Madison, Wisconsin. And I'm a painter and a sculptor primarily. And I have really, really enjoyed doing temporary site-specific installations as well. And the reason that I like the site-specific temporary installations is because I think art is somehow more accessible to more people when it's outside of a museum or outside of a gallery setting. So it's a nice way to open up conversations that you might not otherwise have with people. That's something that I really enjoy doing. So I've done installations, another clothesline, a really large clothesline in Wisconsin that was about 3/4 of a mile long, about 8 years ago. And that sort of spurred this idea. And in that situation, I collected about 900 pieces of clothing, but I didn't collect the stories of the farmers, and I really felt like that was a missing piece. So this installation is really about the stories and about the farm community here. So it's visually, it's really fun and playful visually as well, but I think this has a different depth to it.
And so we've just reached one end of it, and you've actually separated the clothing by color.
Right.
And it's quite striking. I mean, with all the greenery out, you can sort of see the pops of color sort of peeking through the trees and the bushes.
I particularly like I like the variety of the things people donated. So people donated socks and gloves and hats and vests for tapping maple sugar trees and really ratty clothing. So this one has a green tag on it. So this is Adam Hayner from Juniper Hill Farm, and the green tags denote that we actually did an interview, and we have a short little documentary about Adam and his Juniper Hill Farm. So there are 9 green tags out here, and so these are all short little videos.
And this one, the clothing story, it's very, very to the point. Yes. My daily work pants.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and you can see that they're really holey. They've got all sort of splotches of grease and paint and all sorts of things on them, so they look like they've been well worn. Some of the other pieces of clothing. This is a student from North Country School in Lake Placid. This student wrote, "This sweater kept me warm throughout the maple sugaring season as I tapped trees and collected sap buckets in the deep snow. Helping make maple syrup with my 8th grade class made it taste sweeter knowing it was a community effort." So what I really love about the stories here is that collectively with 150 different stories, you really get a snapshot of who's participating in farming and all of the different things that people are excited about.
That was artist Brenda Baker. Her installation called The Clothesline can be viewed through November at the Wild Center in Tupper Lake. She spoke with Amy Feireisel. We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Eddie Lawrence of Moira and Dan Berggren of Ballston Spa. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.